In a world ravaged by war and chaos, a group of survivors must band together to brave the dangers of a post-apocalyptic landscape. The year is 2000, and the world has been plunged into darkness. The nuclear fires have burned out, leaving behind a wasteland of ruins and radiation. But amidst the rubble and despair, a glimmer of hope still remains. Join Dork Day Afternoon as they face off against marauding gangs, enemy soldiers, and even the harsh elements themselves in the world of Twilight 2000. Will our heroes survive the challenges ahead? Can they keep their own humanity intact? Or will they succumb to the harsh realities of life after the end of the world? 2 past midnight. An actual play podcast by Dork Day Afternoon.
Aloha! It's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing writer and editor and a friend of the podcast, Eric Palicki. Eric has been on the podcast before. The first time me and Eric spoke was back in June of 2021. And Eric, we spoke about you were promoting Blacksmith for Ahoy Comics. Yeah, that was so cool. And here we are again in June of 2023. He is here to promote Blacksmith, The Key to His Heart, again from Ahoy Comics, this second volume of this successful series. The first issue will come out on June 21st, and the second issue will come out on June 19th. Eric, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing very well, Jason. Thanks so much for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and
glad to hear it.
I can't wait to talk to you about not only the first volume of Blacksmith, but also the first issue of The Key to His Heart. I can't wait. Well, of course, we're not going to spoil anything. But it's I'll hold off my thoughts on everything when we talk furthermore about the series. Eric, I'm going to go over briefly some of your past works. And Eric, as always, please feel free to correct me if I mispronounce something or if I miss something. Just feel free to correct me. Okay. So, listeners, Eric not only has written the first volume of Blacksmith for Ahoy Comics, he's written other works such as Fake Empire, No Angel. That one he co-wrote with his sister Adrian. He also wrote Atlantis Wasn't Built for Tourists. He has contributed to story collections such as Everything is Going Wrong and Marvel Comics Guardians of Infinity. He has worked on other projects as an editor, such as All We Ever Wanted and Deadbeats 2, Volume 2, London Calling. And I love the Deadbeat series. Those are great.
Thank you.
I love it. And one of your more recent works was that you did a Kickstarter that was about 2 years ago, I think, Manticore.
Yeah, it was. It feels like, time is a flat circle, and it feels like it was not much more recent than that. But yeah, Manticore was a Kickstarter that I did in the early part of the pandemic with my collaborator, Chris Peterson. Chris was working at the time on a book for one of the publishers that had a pencils down mandate at the start of the pandemic. So he was looking for something to fill his time, and we got together. We had been friends for a long time, and we were able to collaborate on Manticore, which is just a fun, 48-page novella about a woman who inherits her grandmother's pet monster, and the sort of mythological adventure that spirals into for her.
And then Eric we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah,
Sure.
Yes, that was great. I loved it. So, all right.
Thank you.
Eric, I'm going to ask, do you want to add anything else? Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, that's covers it. One of the other recent books that I did that kind of, I think, unfortunately went under people's radar was a book called Ninja Kaidan, which was published by Black Box Comics, which was, a 5-issue science fiction supernatural mashup. It is literally ninjas fighting ghosts for 5 issues. I had a lot of fun with that book. I hope people will check that out. It was illustrated by Lucas Meyer, who has now gone on to do some work for DC. He's now working on a Titans book at DC and some other projects. And I'm really excited to have gotten to work with him, so I can say, you know, I knew him when.
Yes, and that's right. I'm sorry. I
Nope.
forgot. I missed that one because I remember you gave me advanced copies, and it was a great story. What I read, it was very good, and Lucas's art style was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, and he is incredible, and he's very fast. So
Mhm.
he's kind of got that sort of Dan Mora style as well as the speed. So I look to see great things from Lucas in the future.
All right. Now, before we begin the interview, I want to give a big shout out to Hannah Bahedri of Superfan Promotions for setting up this interview and for the advanced reading copy. Hannah, thank you very much. Eric, I'm going to ask, do you want to add anything?
No, just Hannah is phenomenal. Really appreciate all the work that she and David, her boss, have done to really get the word out about Blacksmith Volume 2. And I'm excited to be talking to you. I really appreciate you. I am actually drinking some coffee that you sent to me. It should be known that being a friend of the pod has some fringe benefits. I'm drinking it out of my cool lion mug in honor of Manticore.
Yes.
So really appreciate it.
No,
so appreciate all that you do to promote the Ahoy books, my work in general, and everything else. So shout out to you, Jason.
Oh, no, Eric, thank you very much. Real quickly, fans, listeners, you know, I love the what Ahoy has been putting out. It's very good. And it's a wide range. It's a very wide range of stuff. It's like you have a little bit of the superhero aspect with Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man, to some satirical things, and science fiction stuff. So it's very good. And for Blacksmith, it's kind of like a crime. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a little bit of a crime noir, with supernatural elements to it.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, if we want to go into that, I don't want to go too far off, you know, the outline that you sent, but really, for me, the impetus of doing the first Blacksmith volume was, man, I really love the Maltese Falcon, but wouldn't it be cool if there were monsters in it? So that's where the story came from. And so, yeah, it is definitely a mashup of noir with the supernatural. I'm a big fan of, you know, works like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the TV series Supernatural were kind of seminal works for me as I started to be mature as a writer. So, you know, it's not exactly horror, but it has the elements of what are kind of considered horror, obviously.
Yes.
As we'll get into, my main character is a werewolf. And there's a lot of other supernatural and horror elements that make their way into their story.
Actually, I'm just going to say, you know, Eric, before I just jump in, let me just go over what the Comics Beat gave a quote on Volume 1's trade. They said, if Raymond Chandler had written a Universal monster movie, I imagine this is what it would have looked like. And I would say I agree with that. It's great.
Thank you.
You know, and then I'm going to start at. Let's just have for new listeners. Like, who are your main characters in this series, in both series?
Sure. So our main character, our focal point character, is Janie Jones Strummer Mercado. She is a private investigator who happens to be a werewolf. And as we meet her in the first volume, she has kind of finds herself torn between the two worlds, the normal world of being a human and the secret supernatural underground that exists in the story. She doesn't feel like she belongs in either place. She has kind of carved out a niche for her as a private detective, mostly dealing with normal human clients, where being a werewolf gives her certain advantages. She has an enhanced sense of smell, enhanced sense of hearing, all of the things that you would think a wolf might bring to the table, which gives her an advantage as a private detective. And then as the story opens, she is approached by Rainsford Black, a very wealthy sort of a cipher, who hires her to find 30 stolen bullets that he claims were actually made from the silver paid to Judas in the Bible, which then throws her back into that supernatural world that she had been so eager to disavow, to abandon. And that kind of drives the story. Her partner as a private detective is a half djinn named Ben Silat, who, like her, being only half djinn and half human, feels himself torn between two worlds. And that kind of provides the driving force of the themes of the story. Is, it's really about those two characters, and mostly Strummer finding her place in the world and coming to terms with who she is, and then while also trying to solve this supernatural mystery. And as she goes further into that supernatural underground, she encounters vampires, Lovecraftian demons.
Oh yes.
The as you mentioned, as we've talked about, and I don't think it's a spoiler, she meets a minotaur. She meets the minotaur.
Yes, yeah.
And then other, various creatures from myth and fantasy, on her way to sort of, coming to terms with who she is, which is really the driving force of the first volume. Rainsford Black, who lends his name to our title, Blacksmith. He is a self-described supernatural big game hunter. He's not exactly a villain, even though he does seem like a bit of an antagonist in the story.
Yes.
In his mind, he is like a Roosevelt era conservationist. Feels like this big game hunting is actually of benefit to the world. He when we first meet him, he is bragging about how he killed the Fenris wolf from the Norse mythology, therefore preventing Ragnarok. So right, like he's as a side benefit to his big game hunting, he's stopping Armageddons, right? Stopping apocalypses. So he's kind of a morally gray character that I really enjoyed writing. And because I had kind of written myself into a box by calling the book Blacksmith, I had to bring him back for our second volume. And that's so he's not in the first issue of the second volume, but his presence is felt towards the end of the story, as I'm sure you've noticed.
Yes. And I just want to say I love that name, Rainsford Black. It's such a cool name.
So Rainsford is the name of the protagonist of the short story The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell, which is obviously a story about a big game hunter who finds himself being hunted as a human by an even more dangerous hunter. And so I stole that name because it is such a fantastic name. And if you're talking about someone with a certain amount of wealth, it has that old money kind of flair, but it also is a callback to Rainsford from the story The Most Dangerous Game.
Eric, I have to say, and I'm kind of going off the cuff here, but I just love your ideas of how the strong influences of the Maltese Falcon, The Most Dangerous, because I remember because correct me if I'm wrong, The Most Dangerous Game, was that a short story?
It was a short story. It's been since turned into numerous numerous movies, numerous it has been the inspiration for numerous other movies and stories as well.
Because the only reason I'm asking is because I remember, sorry, I'm really kind of going off the cuff, is
Sure.
I remember reading that short story in English lit class. I can't
I'm
back in
sure it
high
was.
school, and we're talking. And I'll just date myself. We're talking 40 years, and that's a story that has stuck with me because it was. I can't remember the details of it, but it's something that just stuck with me. I remember that. That was great. But like I said, um and when I'm just, it and I love these strong influences that you brought to this series, and it really shows. It comes out very strong. It's very clear. Um, Also, too, what I really love about the story too is that Jane and Ben um, have this strong friendship, and that's really clear in the very first issue. And it's like they've been friends for such a long time. Great. That's one of the things I love about this the series.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really wanted to write those two characters as I think that there is an absence of quality platonic friendships between men and women
Yes.
in storytelling. And so I really wanted to develop that strong friendship between them and, and deliver them. And then as we get into starting to talk about the second volume, we'll start to see that some challenges to that friendship that
Hmm.
start to pop up as we progress through the
Hmm.
key to his heart.
Hmm. Okay. Um, uh, the other thing like I mentioned about Jane and Ben having this strong friendship. The other thing too that comes out clear in the first volume is that they both have each other's back. That's the thing I love about them. There's another character I want to bring in too. For new listeners, I want to ask, who is Grim?
So Grim is Janie's or Strummer's dog, uh, her pet dog, who for those who have uh, an interest or knowledge of uh, British and British folklore and mythology, a cemetery grim is an actual historical concept. When a church was consecrated, there was this belief that the first soul buried on the grounds of a church cemetery would be consigned to haunt and thereby protect the grounds.
Hmm.
So what they would do historically is they would bury a dog on the ground on the site of the church to consecrate it, and therefore they would consign that dog to be the spirit protector of the church, so that it didn't fall on a human to be stuck haunting this church for
Hmm.
eternity.
Hmm.
So Grim is a dog, but the big surprise at the end of the very, very first issue is that he is also a ghost,
Yes.
and he he's also a very phenomenal character to write, and he plays a very important part in the first volume. Uh, and then of course I couldn't not write a second volume without Grim showing up.
Oh
So
yes. Yeah. It's great. I'm sorry. I want to go back to the Minotaur because I love it.
yes.
How I just his he's such a fun character. You know, he was just fun. And correct me if I'm wrong, because when Ben meets the Minotaur doesn't go, oh, you're a Minotaur. He goes, no, I'm the Minotaur. There's only one.
Right. Right. So in the original mythology that introduced the concept of the Minotaur, there is one Minotaur, Asterion, the son of King Minos of Crete.
Hmm.
There's one.
Yes.
There is one Minotaur. It's only until later, when you get into Dungeons and Dragons and other
Hmm.
fantasy stories, that we start to see Minotaurs in the plural.
Hmm.
Uh, so I wanted to just kind of go back to that original concept and say, well,
Hmm.
no, there's just the one,
Yes.
and he has uh, a certain amount of ego and pride about being unique. So he will be the first to correct you if anyone calls him a Minotaur. And then that's another part of Rainsford Black's. He considers himself a collector, so
Mhm.
he doesn't always kill this big game that he hunts. Sometimes
Yes.
he enlists it, and that creates, I think, a rift between Strummer and Rainsford Black in the first volume. Is he she is worried that he sees her as another conquest, as someone to add to his collection. So she
Oh
is
yes. Mhm.
reluctant from the beginning to work for him,
Mhm.
uh, even as more information about their relationship and about his motives becomes clear. Even
Mhm.
before all that happens, she is a little on edge because she feels like he sees her as just another trophy to add to his trophy case.
So, listeners, you know, um, let me just say before I got a couple more questions before we start jumping into volume two. But listeners, if if you are interested in, Blacksmith Volume One, please go pick it up. It's very good. It's available. Order through your comic shops. It's available on Comixology. Um, Eric already knows that, I love the characters. The other thing I really love, Eric, I forgot to mention to you was that um, the dialogue flows so naturally. That's the thing I love about it.
Thank you.
There's something about because and I'll talk to you about. I don't want to spoil it, but there's one scene in the first volume that just made me laugh so hard because it was natural. And it just felt natural. That dialogue was natural. Like these are three guys in a car, and this is what three guys in the car would say. If something happens. I think you know what scene I'm talking about.
I do, and that's actually so. For those that are aware or not necessarily aware of the output from Ahoy, is one of the edicts for Ahoy Comics is, they have a sense of humor.
Yes.
Um, they don't all need to be naturally comedies, but the edict from the editors on down is that the books need to have a sense of humor.
Hmm.
And while Blacksmith, I think, has the somewhat dubious distinction of being the least funny of all of Ahoy's output, I think there is still a sense of humor to it. And I am really proud of when I could work in sort of in a naturalistic way, those jokes, whether it's that scene, whether it's Ben's pet name for the twin vampires that we meet.
Yes.
Um, I am really proud that I was still able to deliver on that
Yes.
that that mission statement of Ahoy, even if the book itself is not, it wouldn't be classified as a comedy,
Yeah.
but it still has a sense of humor.
Yes. The other thing I also want to mention too that I also love is that it's a good crime story. Strong relationships between Ben and Jane that I really love. The other thing I also love too is the wonderful, um, colorful characters that they come across, in their story. And like you said too, Jane is a private investigator, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most private investigators, like you said, that um, they kind of like investigate like seedy things, kind of like not normal life things. It's always the seedy things, and this is where Jane goes, and she sees like she goes to the bar, she goes to these dot something with nice bars, but also she has to go to like certain places where it's like normal people won't go. But it's so filled with wonderfully colorful characters like Rainsford, um, the vampire twins. Oh my God, I'm sorry, but because there's some natural funniness to that where I think Ben and Jane keeps getting the vampire twins mixed. They call them the wrong names.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love that. Um, Sorry. Um, Before we continue on, because for listeners, volume one and also the key to his heart is in black and white. I read the back matter, but for listeners, can you maybe like give your reasoning why it's in black and white? I read it and it's great, but I want you to tell the listeners, why you guys kept it as black and white.
So I will confess that, and you've seen the original color pages by D. Cuniff in the back of the trade. I pitched it as a color book, and I wrote it as a color book, and the decision to make it black and white came from Ahoy. And my first instinct when they said that was that it was a little disappointment. I will confess that I was a little bit disappointed when they told me that the book was going to be in black and white, and it felt like they didn't believe in this book and they were just trying to get it out the door. But Sarah Litt, to her credit, the editor on the book, she said, no, we really believe in this book, and the reason we are doing it in black and white is because we really believe in it, and we think that it's going to be just as good, if not better, as a black and white book, to harken back to those old Universal monster movies, the noir film antecedents. And the more I started to think about it, I realized, the most successful independent comic book of the last 40 years was in black and white, and it wasn't a superhero book.
Yes.
So I am doing a book that's not a superhero book in black and white. I have nothing to be afraid of. And I am so glad that the folks at Ahoy pushed me forward to do that, because the book is gorgeous. Wendell Cavalcanti, he's my ride or die. We have been working together for almost 20 years now. He drew this. He's drawing the second volume. He did Atlantis Wasn't Built for Tourists over at Scout Comics. We've been together for a long time as a collaborative team. He did such a phenomenal job adding those gray tones to the story to make it feel like it was always meant to be black and white. And yeah, I am completely happy with that decision, even though ultimately it was not mine. And while I'm shouting out the rest of the team, I do want to also say that the awesome covers by Liana Kangas for both volumes, she adds a splash of color. Her mandate to herself was to make those covers look like pulpy 50s and 60s paperbacks, but with her signature neon colors. And I think she does such a great job with those covers. So I just couldn't be happier with how the book shaped up. Also, I got the first volume has a foreword by John Layman, which was awesome. And if you know anything about Tom Tyre and John Layman, you know that they have an ongoing Twitter feud. So I was so happy that John was able to set that aside and provide that forward for me. Even the collections editor at Ahoy is Corey Settlemeyer, who used to work at Marvel, and actually Harold's from my hometown. We've been friends since before either of us actually worked in comics. So it was really nice to finally get to work with my friend Corey after knowing him for 20 plus years on a personal level.
Going back to Wendell's art style, because the black and white and his art style, it does fit. I love, because it sets the tone and the atmosphere for the book. I love it.
And then with the second volume, obviously knowing that we were going to be in black and white from the jump, I definitely was able to tailor the story a little bit more to that strength. So yeah, just delighted with how it turned out.
All right. Let's start talking about Blacksmith, the key to his heart. I just want to say this. So for new listeners, if you're wondering for me, I'm saying this, and Eric, you can correct me, but for listeners, if you're wondering if you need to read the first volume before you pick up this series, I'm going to say I really don't think you need to, because Eric and the team did such a great job in bringing readers up to speed. Because I read there was maybe a sentence or two in the title page, and it's just basically to the point. And I know Jane and Ben, probably in the first 3 or 4 pages, they kind of went over, not detail, but just, hey, remember when we did? Okay, and it was great. But Eric, I'm also going to tell listeners, I do recommend that they should pick up the trade, because the thing is, I love because you can see Jane's character's development, her, um, and um, and and I can't find another phrase to say this, but pick up the first listeners, just pick up the first volume, because it's going to enhance the second volume, especially for the character. I'm going to ask, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, the mercenary in me wants you to pick up the first volume because I want to sell more copies, right?
Yes.
And I think that the second volume is written in such a way that, yes, you can go into it blind, and with relative ease, you can pick up that these characters are, the supernatural elements are up front. You'll be able to pick up what's going on. That said, the end of the first volume finds Janie in a new status quo where she's more comfortable in her skin. She has reestablished her detective agency as someone that caters more thoroughly to people on the supernatural side, which is where she starts off here. But that's all covered in the first volume. So yeah, you can pick up The Key to His Heart and hit the ground running. Whether you've listened to this podcast or not, you'll know exactly what's going on by the end of the first issue. I think it's very important in this day and age to make comics as accessible as possible from the jump, and I hope that I did that.
And then I'm going to say that's the perfect segue. So without spoiling anything, where is Jane right now in the first issue of The Key to His Heart?
Sure. So she is in a relationship. She's established her detective agency more firmly. She is on her way out the door. Literally, as we catch up to her, she's getting dressed to head out the door on her next case, which is a missing persons case. She's been hired to find a teenage runaway, and then we're off and running. But there is, of course, because there's that supernatural element, almost immediately more than meets the eye, both in regards to the case itself and this particular runaway that she's off chasing.
Yes.
And much like the very first issue of the first volume, this is a largely done in one story. It's going to thread some storylines that will be carried forth. But I think if you pick up The Key to His Heart #1, it's going to give you a complete piece of story. And hopefully it's enjoyable on its own, even as it does set up where we're headed for the next four issues.
And then the other, I'm sorry, the thing I love about this first issue too was that because Jane is in a relationship with Carly. Carly is kind of like a side character in the first volume.
Yes.
The thing I love about this too is that, like you said, Jane is that at the end of volume 1, she established herself and everything. And also too, in this first issue, the other thing I love about it is that in some sense, not only has Jane reestablished everything, she's comfortable in her skin. The other good thing I love about it too is that Carly's kind of like her anchor in this in kind of like this crazy world. And Carly, and I'm going to just keep it at that. But that's the thing I love about this. It's great. It's not only does Jane have this, strong friendship with Ben on one side, but she also has Carly on the other side to anchor her down to as well.
I think that's really true. And I don't want to spoil anything for what's to come, but I do want to remind listeners and readers that one of the hallmarks of noir fiction is that we sometimes find that these characters kind of have to go to very dark places. And I don't think it's going to shock anyone to know that we're going to put poor Strummer, poor Janie through her paces with this story. So don't let yourself get too comfortable with the happily ever after ending that we gave her at the end of volume 1 and at the beginning of volume 2. There's a lot of there's a lot of good things that are going on in her life, but what happens when we sort of upend that life?
Yes. Okay. All right. Let's see. Honest. I now correct me if I'm wrong because I'm trying. For the first volume, you created a playlist, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I think I did. And there is a playlist that exists for this one as well. I will post it to my social media. You can follow me at Eric Palicki on Twitter. I will be posting that as we get closer to the release date. I'm not sure when this podcast will go live, but the release date for The Key to His Heart volume number 1 is July 21st, June 21st, excuse me. June 21st. So I will be posting that online. It is Janie Jones. Her nickname is Strummer. It's a nickname that was given to her by her father because he was a lover of the Clash. She has inherited 2 things from her father, as she was fond of saying: a love of a stupid British punk band and the ability to turn into a wolf. Those are the 2 things she inherited from her father. And so there's going to be a lot of punk on that playlist.
So cool. Okay. I'm going to ask you, what was, well, let me preface the question first because at the end of volume 1, I read the back matter and I'm hoping it was from Sarah Litt, your editor. So was Sarah the one that got that call to do a second volume?
Yeah, she's the one who said she got the call from the folks on high at Ahoy. She gave me the call just before Christmas. I guess it would have been 2021. And so we spent most of 2022 putting this book together, and here we are.
I'm sorry, listeners. So actually the back matter about Sarah's story was I read it in the Key to His Heart issue number 1 because I love it because Sarah mentions that when she got the call to do another volume, she was dancing, and I think it was in her family kitchen as soon as she hung up. That's what she wrote. If I'm hoping I got that correctly. So, like you said, you got the call right around Christmas time. What was your reaction when she said, "Hey, let's do another volume"?
I was over the moon. I have a bottle of whiskey, Writer's Tears, which is an Irish whiskey, and I only ever do 1 finger of Writer's Tears every time I get a story or a book greenlit by a publisher. And it must have been early December because one of my dearest friends, Michael Wernke, was actually in town that weekend when the email came through. So it was really nice to be able to have that glass of whiskey with a friend. It must have been the December of 2021 because it was Emerald City weekend. It was Emerald City Comic-Con was happening that weekend.
All right, now, without spoiling anything, after volume 2 is done, completed, do you have another case for Strummer to solve in case Sarah calls you Christmas of this year?
I would play with these characters any day, forever. And I hope Wendell will stick with me. I hope that Liana will keep doing covers. I hope that we can keep that whole team together.
Yes.
I think it's a very rich world that we've created. I think that there are a lot of stories to tell. Again, the title of the book is Blacksmith, which means that I have to keep poor Rainsford around because I made the mistake of keeping him putting his name in the title. But I think that one of the things I do want to talk about for what's to come is the title is a reference to Rainsford Black for the second volume for The Key to His Heart. And this is going to go a long way towards, if not making him a hero, at least giving readers a greater understanding of who he is as a character. and I'm pleased with that. I'm pleased with how we've been able to evolve him as a character through the second volume, along with, of course, continuing to show what's going on with Strummer and Ben and Carly, and you do see a return of Aster. We have a brand new character named Claire who appears and sort of, there's a couple of things. There's Carly and Claire are both there and in their own way, kind of driving a wedge between that friendship that you spoke about between Ben and Strummer in the first volume. So, challenging that and also putting these characters through their paces. I'm so excited for people to read this book. When Sarah gave me that call, I was through the moon, but I really felt like if we had only been able to do the one volume, that I had done right by these characters in the first volume. And so I was honestly a little bit nervous about returning to after the first volume. Now, like I said, I could tell these stories forever.
Yes.
But I did give Strummer the ending she deserved.
Yes.
At the end of the first volume. So having to further evolve this, I was a little nervous initially. But once I found my way into the story, I am so excited about where it's going, where it's headed. It's kind of her Empire Strikes Back, though. So I do hope that we get to come back for a volume 3. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what Ahoy and the very fickle comics reading public has to say about that.
All right. Okay, Eric. Thank you very much for talking to me about Blacksmith and Blacksmith, the Key to His Heart. I'm going to start moving on because I'm going to slowly start wrapping things up.
Yeah, of course. I know.
I want to talk to you about your other project, Manticore. So for listeners, because I've read it, I loved it, but for listeners, what is Manticore? Well, no, actually, you already talked about Manticore at the beginning.
Yeah, I already talked about Manticore.
Yeah.
It's the story of a young woman who inherits her grandmother's pet monster and what happens next. And we gave Sheila a story that, again, I think if we never get to tell any more Manticore stories, it would be okay. But I really did leave things in such a way that I would love to return to that. Yes. And it's really just a matter of my availability and Chris Peterson, the collaborator, my artist on that book, his availability and being able to return to that story. I think that, again, that's a world that we created that allows for a lot of rich world building, and I would love to return to that and do volume 2. And actually, in my head, as I think I talked about when we talked about Manticore last time I was on, in my head, there's a 5-volume story to be told.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
and would really love to do that.
And then I'm going to ask for if listeners are interested, where can they pick up a copy of Manticore?
So I am in the process of retooling my web store. But so more to come. I would advise that everyone who is interested, just give me a follow on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Eric Palicki. And as soon as that web store goes live, I will broadcast it there, give people an opportunity to pick up both of those books, as well as some of my back catalog, the anthologies that I edited or co-edited. I want to just briefly shout out, since you spoke about the Deadbeats anthologies, that my co-editor on those was Joe Corallo. And my co-editor on All We Ever Wanted and Maybe Someday was Matt Miner. Both are enjoying quite a bit of success. Matt with his Young Men in Love anthology, also from A Wave Blue World, and Joe. Joe recently co-wrote the long form project at Comixology Originals with Rachel, the now late Rachel Pollack, The Neverending Party. So I just advise everyone to go check out both The Neverending Party and Young Men in Love if they liked the work that I did with those gentlemen.
That's right. No, thank you very much. I'm slowly wrapping things up.
Sure.
How great was it to be back at conventions?
Oh, I loved it's great. Conventions are a little bit like when you're a kid and you go away to summer camp and you get to see all your friends, your summer camp friends. So it was just delightful to get back, interact with fans, but also to see some of my colleagues who live all over the country and who have been cooped up for 2 years. Thank goodness for the internet in terms of being able to communicate with them, but just being able to, give my friends a hug has been
Mhm.
wonderful.
That's so cool. Um, were there any great con moments in the past year that stood out to you? Besides meeting
Like
friends. Mhm.
it's just getting to see some of those people again.
Mhm.
Uh, just having them, show up at your table, getting to meet some electronic, some internet friends for the first time is always delightful. As far as any specific moment, anything I mention is just going to be like I'm going to feel bad after the fact for not mentioning somebody else.
Oh
But
yeah.
so like so many people, it was delightful to see uh, back in real life,
Hmm.
in meat space, if you will.
Yes. Okay, and then when and where are your next convention appearances? Like for this
So the only thing I have on the books for the rest of this year definitively is going to be New York Comic Con,
mm,
uh, which is in October.
mhm.
So I'm going to enjoy, a quiet summer and then get back to the grind towards the end of the year. Uh, and then, who knows what's on the horizon for next year? Definitely, as ever, Emerald City and C2E2 in Chicago.
Mhm.
Possibly, I would really like to make it to Terrificon some year.
Oh yeah.
Who knows? Maybe I'll make it out to the Honolulu Con.
Yes.
Knock on wood.
Yes. Yes. Um, sorry, I'm gonna circle back to Terrificon. Oh my God, I've heard such great things about that. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So my sister got to do that show as an Orville cast member last year, and she just loved it. She just talked it up so much, and
Mhm.
it's hard for me living on the West Coast to get out to the East Coast shows, so I have to be very I have to be very careful in what I do. I'd
Mhm.
also really like to make it back to Motor City Comic Con is a show
Mm,
that I have never done as a creator, but
mhm.
that was my very first convention experience when I was a kid. So I feel like that would be a nice full circle moment to go back and be a
Mhm.
creator at that show.
That's so cool. That would be nice. That would be really
Yes.
nice. All right, Eric, any closing words to our listeners?
No, I just want to encourage everyone to stop at their local store on June 21st and pick up Blacksmith, The Key to His Heart #1. Uh, Also, please consider checking out the first volume, which is now in trade paperback. And follow me on social media. You can find me Twitter and Instagram at Eric Palicki.
Eric, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. And thank you for giving me another opportunity for coming back on the podcast. Thank you very
I
much.
will anytime you let me know when you want me to be here, and I will be ready and waiting. I'll be here with bells on, as they say.
All right. Thank you. All right, Eric, thank you very much. And Eric, I wish you all the success with Blacksmith, the key to his heart. Um, if you're a new comic book reader or a lifelong comic book reader, please check out Blacksmith, The Key to His Heart from Ahoy Comics. The first issue, as Eric has mentioned, comes out on June 21st. The second issue comes out on June 19th. Also, too, please pick up the first volume that's already out in trade right now. What I what I love about um what I love about the series is the character Jane. The character Jane. I love um her her great friendship with Ben. Um, like it's they're, they're basically to me they're well-rounded characters. It's almost like it's like people that I kind of know. Well, of course not the supernatural part, but who knows? you know, we may never know. But anyway, but it's such a good friendship among them. Also too, like as you heard, I love how the dialogue is written so naturally. Eric has mentioned about the humor. The humor is organic. It's not forced or anything, and it's set in almost like everyday tones. The humor that we find. That's what I love about it. And also the mixed bag of wonderfully colorful characters in the series. So yes, so if you guys get a chance, please pick up Blacksmith, The Key to His Heart #1, and also the volume number Blacksmith Volume 1 trade as well. I want to give a big shout out to Hannah of Superfan Promotions for setting up this interview and for the advanced copies. Thank you, Hannah, very much for your all your hard work. Thank you very much. And I want to thank
Hear,
Drew.
hear.
And I want to thank Drew, the host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together, for all your hard work behind the scenes. Drew, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.
Aloha.
Who doesn't love coming home to a new package on their doorstep? Today I got to come home to this awesome Comics for Fun and Profit shirt on mine, and you can too. If you go to comicsfunprofit.threadless.com, you can check out their cool merch and get a shirt just like me. That was comicsfunprofit.threadless.com. Join the club. It's where all the cool kids are.